I want to welcome everybody to the 102nd Fireside Chat, which is a ridiculous number to say. I'm still amazed by that. Before we dive into it and have Jason introduce our guest, we have a quick spot from our advertiser from Topo, so we'll be back in about 20 seconds.
Topo Athletic is committed to lifelong health and better movement. Topo builds running shoes for those who get out there every day, regardless of weather, speed, energy, or mood. Their distinctive fit and feel combines instinctive human movement with modern performance and lightweight comfort to help you keep going, keep trying, and keep moving. Discover the Topo difference and step into a run experience unlike any other.
And we're back, guys. That was pretty awesome. We're always transparent and in full transparency with you guys. That was our first time testing that feature out, and we are freaking excited about it.
We're almost professionals here, but let's get started. So our 102nd Fireside Chat episode is going to be with a very special guest. We're going to be joined by Alex Larson, who is a dietitian nutrition coach for endurance athletes that will help you reach your goals through a flexible eating lifestyle. And we've got all the questions for her. If you have questions, type them in the comment box, bring them on. We're happy to present them to her. And without further ado, let's bring Alex back from the back room.
Oh, let's bring you up here.
There you go. Hey, Alex, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you so much for joining us. We are a group of athletes who love food, so there's nobody better than to have you on. And we're going to hit you with the very first, most journalistic question you can possibly imagine. And that is, when it comes to pineapple on pizza, are you a yay or a nay?
I'm personally a nay, but I am fully supportive of people putting it on their pizza and enjoying it.
You could say the truth. Like, no, it's no good. It doesn't belong there.
I truly, I'm not a fan. I love Canadian bacon and mushrooms. That's usually my go-to. But like, if people want pineapple on there, then and I'm ordering the pizza, I'll have like half pineapple on there for
I can accept that. I'm staying on this chat, Jason.
Well, thank you so much for setting the tone off on the right foot for this conversation. Honestly, like, there's so much information out there today about sports nutrition products, eating clean, all of these buzzwords that we hear. As somebody who has gone through the training and earned a degree to become a licensed nutritionist, what's it like on a daily basis? Like, because you've got to get bombarded left and right with messages from people all over the place.
Yeah, it can be really overwhelming. I guess would be the term. I get a lot of messages in my Instagram, like hidden messages about like, oh, support this like mushroom tea or some like random, product. And I'm just like instant delete, for me. It's all about, it is truly like, I'm not even going to like waste my time on those cold DMs, but
hold on a second. So people are pitching you to say, hey, will you promote my mushroom tea? Or
So there was some like mushroom coffee or tea or something the other day, and or like some random supplement. There's lots of supplement stuff, and so yeah, it does get a little overwhelming. I mean, just when I hear from this athlete community about how overwhelmed and complicated and confusing nutrition is these days for people, because they're hearing, like you said, so many different messages and they're very conflicting. I don't blame them, because if you go on like a Facebook triathlon group and someone asks about nutrition and the comment section is like a million different responses, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I would feel so confused and so just unsure of what I was actually supposed to do if I was reading all of these comments and looking for insight. So that's where often I like to just take, on my platforms, taking the nutrition science and just translating it into very simple, easy, tangible advice for people to take and apply to their day-to-day. Like that's my goal, is to just keep it as simple as possible, because then it's going to feel doable.
What is a very simple generic, and I get it, right? We're all individuals. We all have different needs and wants. But for an endurance athlete, especially for beginners, they're getting into this stuff. They're overwhelmed by things already: running shoes, carbon plates, stack height, gear. It's just overwhelming to begin with. And then you tack on nutrition and hydration on top of it. Like, what's a real simple piece of advice that could work for basically everybody from a general standpoint?
Yeah, if you're just getting started into the sport, I think one things that to look for is expecting a couple things to change, like your hunger would be one. That's something I hear from a lot of beginners that are like, I just started training and I'm so hungry all the time. And I think it's important to know that that's really normal. And there are some simple things that you can do to help tackle that. And the first and foremost thing is you need to make sure that you are eating consistently throughout the day. And that might sound a little scary to people because a lot of people go into this sport hoping to lose some weight. And so that they have this dieting mindset of, well, if I exercise more and eat less, the weight's just going to melt off me if I do all of this training. And oftentimes what happens to people is they end up gaining weight because their hunger gets out of control and their eating feels really unregulated and a mess. So, it's good to make sure that you're consistently eating throughout the day, not skipping meals because you end up overly hungry. And then at that point, it's like you're eating anything in your kitchen and like the most random things from your pantry. And it feels really unregulated. And then also looking for protein. That's the other thing that I talk a lot about. Can really help regulate that hunger, and making sure you're getting a consistent amount throughout the day can really help with navigating recovery from all of those workouts as well. So those are like the two main things that I usually tell beginners is like, look out for the hunger and go in with a plan of how to handle that so that you're not in this kind of vicious cycle of like overeating, restricting, binge eating, restricting, because your hunger feels so new to you in that, like when you're starting as a beginner. And then the other thing would be starting to fuel your workouts would be that other big bucket that people they hear all about, like all these fancy fuel products, all these gels that, are like $4 a gel, and they're trying them out and really uncertain of like what product should I be trying. If it doesn't work out the first time, give it a few tries because our gut is very adaptable. You want to train that gut and make sure that when you're trying those new things that you kind of allow your body some time to get used to taking in fuel while you're exercising.
I appreciate you diving into that, and especially using the words like regulate, because there is sort of a vicious cycle that seems to happen with like restricting and then taking and restricting and taking. So I appreciate you giving insight on that. And since we were talking about like products, I know we talked about this a bit in the green room, but I really do want to dive into it. Like, well, it's funny that we talk about regulation, but it feels like with social media and all the information out there, it feels like the wild, wild west right now. There's just so much there's just so much information out there. There's people, I won't say who are putting out like information without having the proper credentials or like having the basis of information behind themselves. So I wanted to ask you, like, how do you get through that noise, and what do you have to say for the individual who's looking at that information and getting overwhelmed by just this oversaturation of information, most of it which is probably not true or is just distorted?
Yeah. So when you're looking at, people on social media for advice, I think one of the first things that I always look for is like, what are your credentials? So, are they a registered dietitian or are they calling themselves a nutritionist? Because the term nutritionist, depending on what state you're at in the US, might not be a like regulated credentialed term. So I'm in Minnesota, where actually the term nutritionist is a licensed term that you have to have the required education background to use that term. But in other states, anyone could call themselves a nutritionist, which gets a little scary because they might just have gone on the internet and taken, a 20-minute online certification course and, get this little certificate and they call themselves a nutritionist. So that's where it gets a little scary. But the term dietitian across the US, and then also in other countries as well, you're going to have, that standardized background in education. So that's usually what I look for first in terms of credential. And then when you're looking at dietitians as well, I think what's great about, my profession is we all have, areas that we go into that we excel in. And so for my community, I like to focus on just endurance athletes, so triathletes, cyclists, runners, and I've really honed in on making sure that I have as much knowledge and understanding of helping that community. And I've done those events before. I've done half marathons, I've done an Ironman, I've done lots of different triathlon distances, done lots of, century rides. So I've been in your shoes and I fully understand what it takes to train for and race in those events, which has really helpful for me to connect with, our athletes and our clients in understanding what they're going through. I've talked with a lot of our athletes before that said, hey, I worked with a dietitian before. She was great, but she just didn't really understand my lifestyle as an athlete. Like she couldn't fathom that I was going out for a 4-hour ride on a Saturday for fun. And I was like, yep, I'm your people. Don't worry. Like, I get it. You tell me how far you want to go and I'll help you fuel for that. And it's not that the other dietitian was bad at their job. It's just they didn't understand that this is a lifestyle and something that we truly love. And there is a way that we can properly fuel you for that. Yeah. So sometimes looking for people that you connect with in that sense, that is also, I think, really important.
Yeah, I think personal experience is so important in that. And I think that, you've done so many of these events yourself, and I'm definitely curious to know, like, was it your passion for endurance sports that fueled you wanting to be a dietitian in this space, or was it the other way around?
It was really, my parents were both in the healthcare field. They both were in nursing. And so I thought I was going to become a dietitian and work in a hospital. And ironically enough, I have never actually worked in a hospital. But when I started as a dietitian, 13, 14 years ago, sports nutrition wasn't even on my radar, but at that time I was just getting into triathlon. I just had done my first sprint. And then fast forward, to 2014 when I was doing Ironman Wisconsin, that's where I really started to feel my calling, because when I crossed that finish line, all I thought in my head was like, holy shit, if I didn't know what I was doing with my nutrition, I don't think I would have gotten to the finish line. It's like a war zone, that second half of the marathon. There's vomiting, there's crying, there's cramping. It's awful. And so, when you witness that, it just was like a permanent memory in my mind now from 10 years ago. And so I'm like, I need to help my people out. Like, this is horrible. Like, there's a huge influence that I can make on their race and just in improving their nutrition, their hydration, their electrolyte intake, and make it such a more enjoyable experience. And because it's so much work to train for those races that I wanted to pay off on race day. So yeah, that's where it all started. Was I crossed that finish line, and then at that point was where everything stemmed to starting Alex Larson Nutrition.
I'll let you get on the next question, Jason, but I just have to make a comment that, like, I just love being an endurance athlete, man. Like, we're talking about a war zone and people like vomiting and like it's cold and with a smile on our faces, Like,
seriously, where you finish and you're like, that was the most horrible thing I've ever done, and then 2 days later you're like signing up for another race.
It makes no sense. Literally no sense at all.
There's something wrong with us, but we're all in this together.
I love Type 2 fun.
We have a question from Mike DiGiovanni over on Instagram, and I'll read it for you. He's asking about any advice for endurance athletes in a race who know that they need calories but can't stomach the thought, pun intended, of eating anything.
So this is where there's a few different situations that I'm thinking might be happening. So generally when people start to have that like flavor fatigue is what I often call it, where you're kind of more towards like the end of your race, or especially like a really long distance race, we do get flavor fatigue really easily. And so that can be something that happens where it's nice to have a few different flavors and options with you in terms of fuel, because you never quite know what you're going to feel like you're wanting. If you've been fueling your entire training with a very specific product and a very specific flavor, and then all of a sudden on race day, you're like, this is all I've been trialing, and now I can't even stomach the thought of consuming it on race day. Like you're in a bad spot. So it's good really throughout training to try a wide variety of things so that you're going to tolerate it really well on race day. The other thing I would do would be like drinking your calories. Usually you can like sip on things in small amounts and get in a good amount of calories through like a hydration mix in your bottle. That would be a really great option, especially if you're on the bike. I have a saying that the bike is the buffet, where you can usually take in a large amount of calories and get yourself in a good spot. So that would be another aspect of it. If you are noticing that your heart rate is really high, what can be happening there is your body is now diverting blood flow away from the gut and sending it more to your muscles and your skin to help regulate your core body temperature, to keep you keep more oxygen getting to your muscles where it's needed. And so when that blood flow gets diverted away from the gut, your gut motility is going to slow way down. And so that's where people are like, oh my God, my stomach feels so bloated, so full. And it's because things have kind of stopped moving and your stomach isn't emptying. And so at that point, you're like, I can't even fathom taking any more because I feel like I'm going to throw up. That's another like bad spot to be in. And you have to slow way down to get your heart rate down and get that blood flow back to your gut. So there's, like I said, lots of different things that could be happening in that situation that I could think of where you're just not wanting to take that fuel in.
Hey, Mike, if you don't mind giving me more context on your question about Coca-Cola, I'll ask Alex, but I'll also give this story. When I was racing Cocodona, I was using gels, and it caused some sores in my mouth to the point where I couldn't take it anymore because it was so much sugar that I was consuming throughout the day, right? That I actually had at every aid station instant oatmeal put into a Ziploc bag with water, so it just became mush. And then I would just peel the Ziploc bag a little bit open so I could squeeze it into my mouth. So I was getting those carbs and calories to keep moving throughout the day. Because otherwise, like trying to eat gel, again, it wasn't so much flavor fatigue. It was just like, it was so much sugar that I needed to get away from it. And of course, time in the event is going to play a role in that, right? Like an Ironman, for me, I'm finished in 12 hours. Cocodona took me 4.5 days. And so you're going to need different things along the way as you're going through.
Yeah, I've seen people do potato flakes, like instant potatoes, and mixing that up, like, and putting that in a bag and squeezing that into their mouth as well.
The best food of all time for me is mashed potatoes with maple syrup. Again, if you put in a Ziploc bag and you squeeze it, so you have the maple syrup, which is like that instant sugar, and then the potatoes, which is that long-lasting carb, it'll be there for a little while. That to me was like a game changer during Cocodona as well. It was fantastic.
Potatoes are like the superfood. They're like the ultimate superfood. I mean, they can be made into so many different ways, and they're always delicious. And they're just a winner in my book. I actually used soft-boiled potatoes on the bike of my Ironman run, or my Ironman, because it was like no wrapper. I boiled them in really salty water, so they had some extra nice to it. It was just a nice, like, something to eat, during a long day. It was great. I love potatoes.
Where did you store them?
I had like a fuel belt, and so people would like come up to me on the bike and they're like, "What's in your bag?" I'm like, "It's potatoes." And they're like, "Oh, I thought it was apples." And I just like eat them like an apple. It was awesome.
That's fantastic.
I love it.
The question I was going to ask you, I'm sorry, the question I was going to ask you, Alex, is because you talked about testing throughout training. Like, what's a general guideline for testing a product, right? Like, should we test it for a week, 2 weeks? Like, is there a general guideline for testing a product before we know that it is either A, working, or B, it's absolutely not going to work for us?
Yeah, well, I mean, the number one most important factor for me with a fuel product is you have to like the taste of it. Because if you don't like the taste of it, you're not going to want to consume it, and then it's kind of pointless to even try it. So if you like hate the taste and it's just a no-go, then look for something else. When, you know, we're in a day and age where we have a million different products we can try. You know, 10 years ago when I was doing, you know, Wisconsin, there was like hardly any options. And so I mean, it's just wonderful now that we have such great products. So if it doesn't taste good to you, then I would move on to a different flavor or something different. But things like, you know, Morton gels, for example, you know, if you don't warn someone about the texture when they first trying it, like, it's a shocker for people. But the flavor is so mild a lot of times that usually like 3-4 times of trying that gel, you kind of get used to that texture and you can tolerate it really well. And it's nice to have that in your back pocket because at Ironman races, it's offered at the aid stations during the run. And so, you know, you're going to have an option that you've tried. It's going to, you know, your stomach's going to tolerate it really well, and you can use that and don't have to carry as many on yourself during the race. So, I mean, I would give it like, you know, a couple weeks, you know, trying it 3-4 times in your training. I'd try it with different intensities as well. Usually with like the liquid-based carb sources, you're going to typically tolerate those faster because your body doesn't have to break those down. Like maybe something like a chew or like real food would, you know, that's going to get digested a lot faster and typically gets tolerated a little bit better. But if you're going to try more solid-based stuff, I would give it a little bit longer. I mean, usually we talk about like within 6 to 7 weeks, you can train your gut to being able to tolerate, you know, larger quantities of fuel during your workouts in your training. So I don't know. I like to rotate products too. Like personally, I've got an entire like box of different sports fuel. I'm not training for anything right now, but I just like to collect it and try different stuff because I'm always super curious in terms of different flavors and products that are coming out to see what's available for athletes to use.
Oh, that's fun. What do you have any favorites that you've seen right now, or like favorite flavors? I won't say like brands, but like any favorite or interesting flavors?
Well, I mean, I can name specific products. Like Spring Energy has this awesome sauce gel, 45 grams of carb in it. It's delicious.
It's the best.
It is the best gel. It's got a little bit different texture just because it's made with basmati rice in it. So it's not like completely smooth, but it tastes like apple pie. 45 grams per gel, which is amazing. A lot of these gels only have like 20. And when you're taking them every 15 minutes, I mean, it's a little wild. Whereas you can take, you know, 2 in an hour and get to 90 grams of carb for your hour. Like they're fantastic. And I mean, they are a little more expensive, but you get more carbs for your dollar. So it's a good value in that sense. I do like the Morton gels. My team and I, we're obsessed with their solid bars. We just think they're like perfect. Like they taste so great. They've got a nice texture. For an energy bar, nutrition wise, we do really like them, but we know that they're expensive. So that's like the biggest downside of those. So those are like top of our list right now. But honestly, like whatever people like, you know, we're all for that as long as it works for them.
I think the key is to your point, Alex, is to try different things. Like I've been doing this stuff for 17 years. So when I started, I used GU, and then Honey Stinger was a thing, and you know, things have come and gone. And just recently, I've started using Osmo Nutrition, and they're one of our marketing partners to, you know, for full transparency. But I absolutely love it, and their hydration product is less intense when it comes to flavor. And so I've been mixing their fuel with their hydration packet and getting upwards of 500 calories an hour, which has changed my game when it comes to ultra running because we're out there for so long. And it has helped me save money on Spring Energy because I'm getting 75 grams of carbs from Osmo for an hour. So now I don't need 2 Spring Energy. I can just take 1. And so and it changes that flavor profile all throughout the time that I'm out there. And it has made a big, big difference.
I'm a huge fan of those hydration mixes because you're already having to carry fluids on you. You might as well add in, the carbs and the sodium in there. So it's basically like a 3-in-1 where you're hydrating, you're getting electrolytes, and you're getting carbs. And I will say the electrolyte ones is the one that we struggle with a lot with our athletes, especially if they're a salty sweater, trying to find a product that will get them enough sodium, because we've seen some athletes where they're needing like 2,000 milligrams of sodium an hour because they're such a heavy sweater and there's so much salt coming out of them. It's like, and they're doing these long distance events, like that can be sometimes really tricky with fueling products to get enough salt in them.
Yeah, we interviewed a gentleman by the name of Riley Rogers who launched a new business called Salt Electrolytes. And I've tested their product and it's really good, but it basically is for super heavy sweaters because you can taste the salt, like, that it's in there. And so I use one of their sticks like every hour and a half so that I don't have too much sodium running through me, because while I'm a heavy sweater, I'm not overly sweaty. So, and then getting that balance in there as well. Mike does have a question for you with regards to, he says he often loses his appetite for anything about 8 hours or longer. Is this where the recommendation is now of getting those liquid calories in then?
Yeah, liquid calories would be where I'd go to, especially for triathletes, like that flat Coke that's offered, in those Ironmans. Those are always like, those don't come in clutch, especially when your stomach starts to go a little south. Like that sounds like it returns people from the dead, I swear to God. And then the other thing too is I would look at making sure that you are fueling a lot, as much as you can earlier on in your events, because that's typically where your gut is going to handle that better. You're not getting overheated earlier on in the race. You're not like feeling that overwhelming fatigue. Your stomach's not, you're going to handle that a lot more. And so like for triathlon, for example, I'm always telling my athletes, I'm like, the bike is the buffet. The goal is always to eat before you're hungry, drink before you're thirsty, stay on top of that, if not ahead of your nutrition, so that you can go into your run topped off. So you don't have to try and like catch up on your fueling during the run when you're already going to be struggling to take in fuel. So I would look at like making sure you're staying really well hydrated earlier on in the race and well fueled, so that when you do start to feel like those a little bit GI symptoms of a little bit of maybe nausea or like a loss of appetite, that you're already like well on top of your nutrition, so you don't have to try and still pushing the envelope later on in those later hours. Does that make sense? Hopefully, guys.
Yeah, the question I would ask is in an event like in a half Ironman, half Ironman, Ironman, half marathon, can you actually catch up? Because the intensity level that you're racing at is going to be higher. Whereas for ultra runners, 50 miles, we're at a much lower intensity level, right? For us everyday athletes, elites are going to be a different conversation. But can you, in those, super intense events like the half marathon, half iron, actually catch up on your nutrition?
It's tough. Usually you're going to leave some like performance potential like out on the race course, because there's that time where you're like feeling kind of that fatigued and you're going to have to slow down for that kind of nutrition to catch up. So that's where it kind of sucks, where we've all had moments where we've like had a major bonk and you're just like, gosh, this sucks. I'm having to slow down. I don't have enough energy to get fatigued. And then you take in some fuel and you kind of bounce back. And so that lag time really kind of stinks. But yeah, the shorter distance events where you're going at a higher intensity, that's where that training that gut is really important, to making sure that your body is used to taking in that fuel at that intensity. I had an athlete a few years ago who always ended up throwing up on the run of his 70.3s every single time. And so what we finally learned is that he was running at a way higher like heart rate zone on the race day than he was in his training. And so there was some hydration and fueling things that we tweaked, but I said, you have to do some training where you're going at that level, so we can train your gut to tolerate that. Because otherwise, like I mentioned before, that blood flow gets diverted away from the gut. That stuff's going to sit there in your stomach. It's not going to empty, and you're going to get sick and you're going to throw up. And so that was a big learning from his standpoint of, okay, I really do have to make sure I'm doing some race pace training and fueling during that at what I need to be ideally, so that you can know if you can tolerate it.
And I love that you mentioned that, and it kind of brings me to like nuances, because, you know, when I started working with my dietitian, like she solved a majority of my issues simply because I realized that I was taking calories as calories and less as food, and just like inhaling my calories super fast. And I think that that was like a nervous, like I'm in a race, I need to get my 200 calories, like I was doing the math and everything, instead of like, I'm going to nibble on this for 20 minutes and digest it and like take a sip of drink and everything. And it's amazing how much that solves. So I'm glad you bring up like the nuances. And that kind of brings me to something we talked about in the green room. One of the big nuances with races, especially like Jason and I have done 100s and 200s, but it's also true in like Ironmans and triathlons. A big nuance is like weather, and like weather and altitude are two big nuances. I specifically wanted to like dive into, well, I wanted to talk about both like weather, like hot weather and like really cold weather, but also like altitude, because I think that there's some really important nuances to talk about there. So I'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that, because I was just telling Jason that tomorrow I'm opening up doors. I'm hosting a masterclass all about heat, humidity, elevation. It's going to be towards the end of April, and we're going to dig into all of like the science and how you can like prep for, you know, like tangible steps to prepping for like those hot races. Because that's something I hear a lot from athletes is I don't handle the heat well. And I think there's a lot of different things that are coming into play there. Adapting to the heat or adapting to elevation can be hard. Making sure that you're fueling at the appropriate, rate in training, so that when you get to race day, there's no, things that you're throwing your body for a loop for. Hydration is a huge one, and getting enough electrolytes and understanding what is your sweat rate, how much sodium are you losing on average. Like doing all of your homework is really, really important, so that you can show up on those tough race days where it's going to be, unusually hot and humid, or you're going to, Colorado to do a big race and you're going to be at elevation. What are the things that you need to do differently so that you have a great race, and also you're staying safe? Because some of those conditions, you can put yourself in a really bad spot health-wise, and end up in the med tent or, worse, the hospital.
Yeah. And I will tell you, and I'll let you go after this, Jason, but I just want to make a quick comment. Like, I am doing a race in Scotland coming up soon, and the weather is going to be like rainy and cold. And I was fortunate enough to do a long run where I was able to fuel, where the weather in San Diego was like actually like very cold and rainy and windy. And I think that that made a difference, because I was looking down and also thinking about, again, like nuances, like, man, my hands are so cold. Like, do I want to reach in and get this gel versus like, do I want to sip this hydration? So I just think like looking into stuff like that is so important.
Yeah, I totally love nerding out on all of that stuff, especially when we have like cold weather racing, like, below zero. I live in northern Minnesota, so there's that Arrowhead 135 race that's very famous up in International Falls. And I've had an athlete that did that race. And so we're looking at like maple syrup, because maple syrup freezes at a much lower temperature, or using thermoses to store their fluids so they don't freeze, and just timing things out, from checkpoint to checkpoint. Like, I love nerding out on all of that stuff, because it does make a huge difference in survival in those kind of extreme conditions. But yeah, when you're in like those cold situations, you also have to account for the amount of energy that it takes for your body to like maintain body temperature. And same thing for the heat. Your body's going to burn through muscle glycogen a lot faster, just because it's trying to use extra energy to keep yourself cool. So you have to think about those things as well when you're looking at more of those extreme conditions.
And one of our affiliate partners, Untapped Maple, falls right into that maple syrup category too. And that stuff is phenomenal.
Yeah, my Canadian athletes love it when we suggest maple syrup as a fuel option because they carry it by the gallon above their fridge.
Gosh, I forgot the question I was going to ask you, but Mike did put up a question here, and I want to get to it before we jump into our rapid fire. So this will be our last question with regards to Vespa. I don't know if you know much about their products or have any information about what they do.
I do not. I'm not familiar with them. I'd have to
add that to your research.
Yes, list. I will. I can do a quick Google and look at it quick, but no, I'm not familiar with them, unfortunately.
They fall into the OFM space, the oxidated. I don't know what that.
Fat metabolism.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't get it. I don't get into all of that stuff.
That's all I need to know.
Carbs are king. Carbs are king in my world. They always will be. Yeah, I mean, for the ultra distance runner, I could see where more of that keto style, fat adaptation would work more appropriately. But for a lot of athletes that want to sprint to the finish, carbs are king.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you this: like you talk about training your gut, and I want to be an example of N=1. So when I first got started in these sports, like I was drinking maybe a half a water bottle per hour, did my sweat test, turned out I needed to be drinking 2 water bottles an hour. And I was like, how am I going to do this? And nowadays it's not a problem. And back then I was probably taking in 200 to 300 calories, but over time I've trained myself to now with the products I'm using, I'm getting 500 to 600 calories an hour, and I feel much better. I feel much stronger for a much longer period of time. And again,
you probably feel better afterwards as well, because that's something. If people are feeling absolute garbage afterwards and having to, lay on the couch all day long, that is a sure sign that we need to improve your nutrition. And that honestly is the best win from our athletes' perspective. Is when they still can, be a functional adult after their long runs on the weekends. I love that win more than any other PR that they achieve.
Yeah, it really does. It really has changed. Like after, 2 to 3 hours of running in the woods, like I'm not ready for a nap. I'm awake, I'm alert, and I'm ready to go. Here was the question I was going to ask. So we talked about elevation. We talked about climate, hot, cold, and you mentioned sweat tests. Recommendations for athletes on sweat tests. Should we be doing them at different times of the year so that we know how much liquid we need and all of these different components, so that when we do travel, if we're traveling to Scotland and we're going to be racing in temperatures differently, we know how to adjust our intake? Is that something you would advise?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea because they're super simple to do. You weigh yourself before, after your workout. You drink a pre-measured amount of fluids. It's a really quick calculation, and just having that understanding of your sweat rate is such valuable information. The other thing too is as we get more fit and get in better shape, we might not sweat as much either. So different climates, different fitness levels. I think that's always really a great idea. And too, as we age, our sweat rate might change as well. Genetically, your sweat rate won't change in terms of like electrolyte concentration loss. Usually that's pretty consistent. But understanding, depending on how much volume you're losing in fluids, and that will give you an idea of how much sodium you need to be taking in to replace that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Alex. Tell the people, besides on Instagram, where they can find you and get more information and maybe engage you as becoming their dietitian.
Yeah, so my website is at Alex Larson Nutrition. You can check out my one-on-one program on there. I've also got a really robust blog of lots of different content and articles on there. And then on all social platforms, I'm at Alex Larson Nutrition.
You ready for the rapid fire questions?
I'm so ready. Let's do this.
Oreos. Are you an OG Oreo fan, a double stuffed Oreo fan, a Kinkster Oreo fan, or the thin Oreo fan?
Okay, I am so ashamed to say this, but I don't like Oreos.
What?
I know. It's so weird. I don't know why. So quick story. I went to it's like the National Dietitian Conference years ago, and there was this ginormous ballroom full of dietitians, and they asked if anyone in the group didn't like Oreos, and it was me and one other person in this entire room, and I was so embarrassed. But I don't know why. I just don't like. I like the cream in the middle, but like the Oreo to me just doesn't taste that great. Like I love cookies, but that's just the one I don't like.
So it's cookies and cream as an ice cream flavor.
Don't hate me. Don't hate me. Yeah, I like cookies and cream ice cream. I like things with Oreos in it, but I don't like just a plain Oreo. Please don't hate me, guys. I'm sorry.
What cookie's replacing the Oreo then?
I just like a chocolate chip cookie or like a ginger snap or like, you know, I love cookies, but for some reason an Oreo just does not do it for me. And like my husband loves Oreos and he will eat any variety of them, like double stuffed, triple stuffed, single, like, but I'm just like, I'll pass.
I love ginger snaps too. Like I am a huge ginger snap fan.
So good.
So chocolate chip cookie, greater than or less than the oatmeal raisin cookie?
Greater than.
Are you a fan of raisins at all?
I like dried cranberries over a raisin. Like,
Is that what you're putting in your oatmeal then? Dried cranberries over raisins?
In my oatmeal, I usually put either like some frozen blueberries. I love the Wyman's of Maine wild blueberries that you get in the frozen blueberry. Those are the best frozen blueberries ever. So that's usually what I'm putting in them.
Licorice fan, and if you are, red or black?
Red for sure.
Red Vines or Twizzlers?
Between the two, Twizzlers, but there's this Australian brand, get it at like the Fleet store. I can't remember what it's called, but that's like my favorite. It's so good.
Can you use that as a straw as well, like you can with Twizzlers?
No, it's like a short, thick, like licorice, like red twisted licorice.
Is candy corn a real candy or is it just earwax coated in sugar?
Oh, it's real candy.
Oh, no.
I don't know. I am my mother's child, and she loves the cheap and nasty candy and candy corn all the way.
Are Peeps a real candy, or are they just, dust covered in glitter?
They're a real candy. I mean, I'll have like one, and then I'm good. But they're not my favorite. Then
it's not a real candy. If you can only eat one, it's not a real candy.
All right, then it's not real.
Creamy or crunchy peanut butter?
Creamy.
When you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, are you putting the peanut butter and the jelly on one slice and then folding the other slice over? Or do you go peanut butter on one slice, jelly on the other, and then smash the two together?
Peanut butter on one, and then I do my own homemade jam on the other, and I make the best peanut butter and jellies.
Do you cut your peanut butter and jelly? And if so, do you cut it into 2 rectangles, 2 triangles, 4 squares, or 4 triangles?
I change it up all the time. Sometimes I don't even cut it. I just don't have time for that. Like I don't want to dirty another knife because I got 3 kids. I've got enough dirty dishes as it is. But my kids, it's always the crust off. And then who knows, their preferences change every hour.
So here's the trick I learned for people who want the crust cut off, but don't want to get messy with the jelly that might squeeze out the edge. Shannon Mick, we had her on this interview, and she told us that she cuts it into 2 rectangles, but then turns it so she holds the crust like corn on the cob and eats in between and never eats the crust. Genius.
Oh. Well, you tell my 4-year-old that, he'll be like, no.
Is red velvet cake a real flavor, or is it just chocolate cake dressed up to go to the prom?
I'm not a huge red velvet fan, so I'm gonna say it's just the prom.
Carrot cake, thumbs up or thumbs down?
As long as it doesn't have nuts in it, I'm thumbs up.
If it has raisins, though?
No.
No? What about pineapple?
Why would you put pineapple in carrot cake?
You're asking the wrong person. Like, pineapple should only
Who puts pineapple in carrot cake?
They put it in there for the extra moisture, but trust me, like, pineapple for me should be eaten fresh and put on nothing else.
Yeah, I like dried pineapple. Dried pineapple is delicious.
Fantastic. And Haribo makes a fantastic pineapple gummy bear, if you're interested.
Haribo gummy bears. There's another good fuel source.
Yes. Fantastic. What is your favorite flavor of ice cream? If you're eating cookies and cream, but what's your favorite flavor?
Yeah. That's so hard. I love all ice cream.
I love it.
That's a good answer.
Okay, so I know what it is. So there is a brand in Madison, Wisconsin, chocolate chop ice cream. They have a flavor called "This Shit Just Got Serious." I kid you not. That is the name of it, and it is amazing. It is a salted caramel ice cream with like some sort of like salted fudge chunks in there, and then salted cashews, which usually I don't like nuts in my food, but like it is incredible. And like always that first bite when I like have it, I'm like, it's just amazing. It's so good.
Did you say it was in Madison?
It's the company's based out of Madison, Wisconsin. Yeah. And the flavor's called "This Shit Just Got Serious."
For everybody racing Ironman Wisconsin later this year, make sure you get some of that stuff.
So good.
Pumpkin spice or apple cider?
Apple cider.
Savory or sweet? You can only eat one for the rest of your life.
Oh, sweet. 100%.
Wow. You're one of the first that said sweet.
Really?
Yeah. Most people are going savory.
I love my sweets. That's like the best part about being an endurance athlete is all the sweets that you get to have to fuel your workouts.
Matt Damon has chosen you to fly with him to Mars. And so now you know you're only going to eat sweet potatoes up there because that's the only thing that grows on Mars. What's your last meal consist of?
Pancakes.
Nice. Chocolate chip, blueberry, plain?
I like blueberry, but I have my own pancake recipe that it took me 2 years to perfect. So I'm just trying to recreate the pancakes of this mom and pop joint that's just down the road from me. And I've got it pretty close. Like theirs are a little bit thinner, like almost like a crepe, but it's more pancake than a crepe. But mine taste very similar and mine are just a little bit healthier.
Are we going to see you on the shelves next to Klondike?
To Kodiak? Is that what you mean?
Oh, Kodiak, yes. See, it just shows you how often I buy that stuff.
Klondike's in the frozen food section.
Good too.
Yeah, I don't know about if I'll be next to Kodiak, but I have the recipe on my blog. If you go to recipes, you'll see my pancake recipe. It's delicious.
Last two: tuna, egg, or potato salad.
Potato. I already kind of answered that, saying like potatoes are the greatest superfood of all time.
Last one: brownies. Are you taking the edge brownie or do you want the center gooey brownie?
Oh, I'll take any piece, but and either.
Alex, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time. Appreciate the advice that you've given us. For those of you who are just joining in right now, it will be on our Instagram feed here in a moment, but it'll also be on our website on Friday as well as our YouTube channel on Friday. Alex, thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. You too, guys.
Bye-bye.